Let me tell you a little backstory. I dated this girl when I was in my senior year of high school. I'm 20 now, so it was a couple of years ago, but still pretty fresh in my mind. For privacy's sake, I won't use her real name, so I'll refer to her as Chloe. Chloe and I met through our job, which, looking back, I now know is never ideal. Before we even started dating, though, there were red flags. Small, almost imperceptible at first, but flags nonetheless that I simply shouldn't have ignored. For instance, she would come to our place of work and just stay there for hours, simply to watch me work. I'd catch her staring at me every once in a while, a gaze that felt less like admiration and more like ownership. A few months into our relationship, things started getting pretty toxic. I would constantly feel suffocated, like an invisible weight was pressing down on my chest. I had no time for my hobbies, my friends, or even myself. She was the type of girl who'd ask where I was, who I was with, and what I was doing 24/7. If I didn't answer a phone call, it would quickly escalate. 25 missed calls and a ton of text messages that would inevitably turn into a full-blown fight, even if I was just in the bathroom. It got to the point where I couldn't even play games with my friends without it causing a massive argument. The joy just drained out of everything. So eventually we broke up, but not without her doing everything in her power to convince me to come back. She would wait outside my place of work for me to get off, and when I would walk outside, she would follow me to my car, physically block me from getting in and try to reason with me. Reason with me about a relationship that felt more like a prison. I got sick of it. The relentless pressure was chipping away at my sanity. One night, she showed up again, wanting to talk. At that point, I honestly didn't know what else to do, so I decided to sit down in her car. Chloe was also trying to sue me for something extremely petty that I'd rather not get into. A baseless threat she'd constantly use as a scare tactic to force me to engage with her. So, anyway, I sat down in her car, the air thick with unspoken tension. She was saying the same old stuff I'd heard hundreds of times, the same manipulative lines designed to pull me back into her orbit. I told her I was done talking, but just then, her dad called her. She seized on this, using it as a direct threat. "If you don't sit here and talk to me," she said, her voice laced with a chilling resolve, "I'll have him sue you now." And to that, I just snapped, "Fuck this," and attempted to get out of her car, but the door was locked. As I fumbled with the lock, she lunged, grabbing hold of my arm, her nails dug deep into my skin. I looked at her, truly shocked, because up until then, she'd only been verbally abusive, never physical. And I had never ever seen that look on her face. It was pure malice, a cold, predatory glint in her eyes that sent a genuine wave of dread through me. I won't lie, I was pretty unnerved. I'm a relatively tall guy and she was very small, so I knew I could overpower her if I had to, but that moment, seeing that look, feeling her nails bite into my skin, it was primal. I swung her door open and tried to step away, but she was holding me incredibly tight. I told her to let me go, my voice strained, but she wouldn't budge. I kept pulling on my arm, trying to escape, but she wouldn't move an inch. At this point, my skin was starting to peel, raw and stinging. So I made a split-second judgment call. I pulled it toward me, effectively throwing her onto the passenger seat, which gave me just enough time to rip my arm free and scramble into my own car. I drove home faster than I ever have in my life, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. I really wish I could say it ended there, that I escaped the nightmare. But of course it doesn't. Unfortunately for me, Chloe and I are practically neighbors. She lives just a couple of blocks away. That night, while I was playing video games, I remember playing GTA 5, which probably made the car noises louder, I heard a car outside. I initially just chalked it up to the game, or maybe the weed I'd smoked making me a little paranoid. But then a little bit of time passed, and as I was still playing, I heard a distinct tap on my window. The sound sent a jolt through me. I thought I was just being paranoid, as weed can sometimes make me a little on edge, especially after what had happened earlier that night. But that thought quickly faded after I heard another tap, and then a female voice, soft yet chillingly clear, saying my name. It was Chloe. And in that instant, panic seized me. My window doesn't have the best blinds, so I knew she could see me. I didn't want to open my window because at this point, I knew she could be potentially dangerous. I pretended not to hear her, desperately hoping that she would just go away. But of course she didn't. After a minute or two of agonizing silence, she started banging on my window hard. Her tone shifted dramatically from that soft, almost apologetic whisper to something aggressive and angry, full of venom. I couldn't make out much of what she was saying, but it was something along the lines of, "You can't do this to me, you're an asshole." That sort of hostile, desperate rage. I knew I had to do something. I didn't want to waste the cops' time, but now looking back, I absolutely should have called them immediately. Instead, I made the stupid decision to open my door and ask what she wanted. I demanded to know why she was here and why she couldn't just leave me alone. Her tone changed once again, shifting back to soft-spoken. She was asking for her sweater back. My blood ran cold. It was a flimsy excuse, a transparent lie. I yelled at her, telling her she couldn't just be at my window at 2 in the morning asking for a sweater. And then I said, if she didn't leave my property, I'd be calling the cops. At this point, she absolutely blew up, screaming at me while starting to sob uncontrollably, a bizarre mix of fury and despair. For a moment, a fleeting moment, I actually felt bad for her. But then my heart dropped, a cold, sickening plunge, as I saw something that still sends shivers down my spine to this day. She wasn't alone. To the left of her, shrouded by the thick branches of a tree in our front yard, was a hooded figure. My eyes immediately snapped to the tree, and she saw me. She knew I saw them. She reached for my arm again, grabbing me, and as she did this, I saw the person run out from behind the tree, sprinting directly toward my window. I couldn't make out any facial features, just a dark, charging silhouette. It didn't matter because they were closing in fast.
In that terrifying moment, my fight or flight instinct kicked in, raw and overwhelming. I slammed my window shut on Chloe's arm. She screamed out in pain and quickly pulled it back. I slammed it shut again and locked it just before the other person reached my window. My heart was racing, a frantic drum against my ribs, and it felt like I couldn't breathe. I showed them my phone, clearly dialing 911, and at that sight they hurried back to her car, started it, and sped away into the night. I was in total shock, unable to comprehend what had just happened. An officer was sent to my house. He took down my story and told me they'd call if anything came of it. Of course, there wasn't much they could do, as there was no physical evidence anything happened, like most 911 calls. As far as I know, she never had any legal action taken against her for this incident. As for what they wanted with me, Chloe had also gotten people jumped and robbed before, so I wouldn't doubt they wanted to do that, or possibly worse. I'm just extremely lucky that the person hiding behind the tree decided to peek out when they did. That fleeting glimpse saved me. This is the harrowing lesson I learned from Chloe. The line between obsession and pure menace can be frighteningly thin. And sometimes the true monsters aren't hiding in the dark but in plain sight, camouflaged by a twisted sense of love. The chilling experience with Chloe left a deep scar, changing the way I viewed personal space and trust. But as I've come to learn, sometimes the threats don't confront you directly, screaming in your face. Sometimes they operate in the shadows, silently weaving a web around you until you realize you're trapped. That brings me to our next story, one I call The Silent Watcher. This didn't happen to me, but to a close friend, and it exposed a different kind of terror. The terror of being unseen, yet constantly observed. This story takes us to a lake house owned by my friend Ethan's family. The house is nestled deep within a quiet pine forest, isolated from the bustling city. To be honest, calling it a simple cabin would be an understatement. It's truly magnificent, or at least that's how it felt to me, someone who never came from much. The house had been in Ethan's family for generations, used as a weekend retreat or for special occasions. Ethan's grandparents had tried to make it their permanent residence for the longest time, but unfortunately they recently passed away. With no one living there permanently anymore, the house mostly lay dormant,
Most of Ethan's extended family lived in big cities, and his parents were simply too busy to make good use of it. Yet, in that sad circumstance, there was a silver lining. Ethan essentially had free access to it whenever he wanted. I think Ethan's dad intended to rent it out to try and make some extra cash, but as far as I know, those gears aren't exactly turning. It's not easy to find someone willing to rent a secluded forest house during the off-season, you know. It was sometime in late October, the weather just starting to turn chilly. Ethan reached out to me, asking if I wanted to come down for the weekend. He didn't have to twist my arm. I had nothing going on, and the thought of relaxing in the quiet of the pine forest, especially in such a beautiful place, was incredibly appealing. Ethan's plan was simple. We'd go hiking, maybe fish in the lake during the day, then roast marshmallows by the fireplace at night, truly embracing a getaway from city life. It wasn't some crazy party weekend, just a peaceful escape from the usual, and honestly, I was really looking forward to it. Ethan and I live pretty close together, so he was going to pick me up and drive me down with him that Friday. I packed a duffel bag, threw it in his trunk, and the two of us started our journey. The first night was chill. We arrived around 6 p.m., dropped our stuff off in the upstairs bedrooms, and settled in. The house had that pleasant, slightly damp, woody smell, typical of a cabin, like a mix of fresh pine and old wood. Not a bad smell, more like the scent of history itself. You could tell it had witnessed decades of family autumns and winters. After a quick meal of pre-made pasta, we decided to sit by the fireplace for a while, just enjoying the evening. Ethan had brought a stack of old books, so we planned to read a bit. Really, the reading wasn't about finishing a masterpiece. It was about just being there in the quiet. At one point, Ethan suggested we try a night walk around the lake. Even though it was quite cold, the sky was clear and full of stars. We walked along the small trail leading to the lake where the moonlight illuminated the still water. The air was crisp and cool, and the only sound was the rustling of dry leaves underfoot. It was the kind of night that made you forget about real life for a bit, an eerie sense of peace when you realize how small you are in the vastness of nature. The next morning, we woke up around 8 a.m. and decided to go for a hike around the area. It was still quite chilly, but there was a faint sunlight filtering through the leaves, creating a warm glow. We didn't push ourselves too hard, just a couple of miles to explore. Ethan is a pretty active guy, and I'd been trying to stay in shape, so it felt good to move after a relaxing night. The rest of the day kind of slipped by without us noticing. That evening, Ethan suggested we watch an old horror movie, but we were both tired after a day of outdoor activities. Even though the idea sounded fun in theory, the thought of focusing on a movie didn't quite align with how our bodies felt after a long day in the sun and wind. Ultimately, we decided to go to bed early. Sometime after midnight, I woke up to a shrill, piercing beep. At first, I thought it was part of a dream, but after a second or two of lying there in the dark, I realized it was real. The sound was like some electronic device, a high-pitched, piercing alarm that cut straight through my skull. I bolted out of bed and started scanning my surroundings, trying to pinpoint where the beeping was coming from. It wasn't coming from my bedroom or anywhere on the main floor. After focusing for a few more seconds, I got the impression that it was actually coming from above me, from the old attic, where we stored rarely used items. Without thinking, I yanked the bedroom door open and made a beeline for Ethan's room. With both hands, I jolted him awake and told him to follow me. Ethan immediately grasped the situation and hurried after me, not even bothering to put on a jacket in the cold night air. As if our lives depended on it, the two of us bolted up the attic stairs, completely unsure of what we'd be running into. The attic was almost completely dark, except for a faint sliver of moonlight seeping through the tiny window. We flicked on our flashlights and began scanning the space, still expecting to see or smell something burning. But there was nothing, no smoke, no flickering lights, absolutely no sign of a fire. It was baffling. Eventually, after some painfully irritating minutes of searching for the source of that god-awful noise, I found something wedged in a crevice between the old floorboards, a small, black device, neatly placed, almost deliberately hidden. Before calling Ethan closer, I decided to examine it myself for a bit, mostly out of pure confusion and curiosity. It was about the size of a Zippo lighter, all black, with only a blinking red light on top and a small screen displaying a continuous, incomprehensible stream of numbers. That was it. No buttons, no labels, no visible controls, just a smooth, jet black casing, that blinking light, and a tiny hidden switch on the side, or at least what looked like a switch. I flicked that switch, and the beeping stopped immediately. Ethan entered the room at the same time. His eyes darted from the floor to me, then to the device in my hand. Neither of us spoke at first. We locked eyes, and I could tell he was just as confused and just as scared as I was. For the next hour, we tried figuring out what that thing was, how it had gotten there, and what had triggered it, but no answer we came up with was satisfying. Ethan swore none of his family members had been in that house in ages, and I believed him. I mean, why would he lie about that? Plus, who the hell would put that thing in their own home? You might think it was for safety or something, or maybe a substitute for a faulty upstairs smoke detector. But again, there was no fire, so it hadn't even prevented any emergencies. And then the matter of how it had gotten triggered in the first place. That was the absolute scariest part. We were sitting in Ethan's room in the dark when a crazy thought hit me. I couldn't believe it hadn't occurred to me until then. The switch. I pulled out the device and very quickly flipped the switch on and off. And you guessed it, the shrill beeping started up again and stopped as soon as I flipped it off. Both of us froze solid, and Ethan whispered, "Oh my God." The thought hit us both at the same time. The only way to operate the device was by hand. Someone else was in the cabin right then. We didn't waste any time. Ethan called the police while I locked the bedroom door, barricading it as best I could with a heavy chair. We waited for what felt like an eternity, and finally the police showed up. We quickly made our way downstairs to intercept them. After giving them a very brief description of what was going on, they did a full sweep of the house while we waited outside, shivering in the biting cold of the forest night, hearts pounding. When they finally came back, what they told us was horrifying. Apparently, all the downstairs windows we had carefully closed and latched upon arrival, were wide open. Even the tiny kitchen window. And it wasn't just that. The blankets we had draped over the sofas were pulled onto the floor, some kitchen drawers were open, and a few small items had been shifted. The kitchen, where we'd eaten pasta, looked like someone had rummaged through it, even though it was neat and tidy when we'd left it. I felt like I was losing my mind, and so did Ethan. But after being escorted by the officers for inspection, we had no choice but to accept this chilling reality. The officers didn't find much else. No one hiding, no clear fingerprints on surfaces, no weapons. After another 20 minutes or so, they told us to make sure all the windows were locked and secured from now on, and to call again if anything else happened. Then they simply left, leaving us in a state of profound disorientation. Ethan and I didn't feel safe being in that house. After someone probably crazy or on drugs, had messed with us like that, in such an unexplainable way. But we had no choice but to stay there that night. We told ourselves we'd sleep there for the rest of the night and leave early in the morning. And that's what we did. Luckily, whoever had been in a house must have left, because nothing else happened throughout the night. There are still parts of that night I can't explain, and I can only imagine what Ethan must be feeling when he thinks about his family's lake house. For all we know, whoever had been in that cabin that night might have never truly left. And this is the lesson I learned. Threats aren't always obvious. Sometimes they hide in the most mundane of things, waiting for a moment to reveal their presence, leaving you to question your own sense of safety forever.